If at first you don't succeed, lower your standards.
Those were up, and they did.
We're smart, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for a film from 1995. It's a comedy film from at the time growing Saturday Night Live stars who are starting to rise to movie fame around the time of the 90s. And it was a film starring deceased comedian Chris Farley, the original actor for Shrek, before he died. And this is for one of his most notoriously best films, 1995's Tommy Boy. From 1995. Directed by Peter Segal. Believe it is. Well, maybe I'll remember it later. But anyway, what's the plot of this movie? Well, Tommy Callahan Jr. is a slow-witted, clumsy guy who recently graduated college after attending for 7 years. His father, Big Tom Callahan, owns an auto parts factory in Ohio. When Tommy arrives back home, he finds he has a position at the factory waiting for him. His dad also introduces Tommy to the new brake pad division of the factory and to Tommy's soon-to-be stepmother Beverly and her son Paul. But when Big Tom unexpectedly dies, the factory threatens to go under unless the new brake pads are to be sold. Therefore, Tommy must go on the road to sell them, along with the assistance of his rival Richard, Big Tom's right-hand man. While Tommy and hopefully Richard settle their differences, get rid of their rivalry, and save their company, or will the factory and the town go under? Yeah, so anyway. Of course, where the film was shot, the film was literally shot in Toronto and Los Angeles under the working title Rocky Road, originally. And upon release in 1995, it grossed over $32.7 million on a budget of $20 million, which was a decent financial success. Not as unlike some other 90s comedies at the time like Wayne's World or Dumb and Dumber, but decent enough. And it received mixed reviews from critics, but since its release, Tommy Boy has went on to become a cult film and has even been successful on home video. And then another thing, though interesting fact, Tommy Boy and the 1994 horror film Wes Craven's New Nightmare are dedicated to Greg Foncia, who literally died 8 months before the release of Tommy Boy. While Foncia did not work on either film, he served as production designer on the first two Nightmare on Elm Street films, and even some other comedies around the 90s like Coneheads and both the Wayne's World movies, which like Tommy Boy were produced by Lorne Michaels. And as for my reaction, well, before I dip into that, let me just say, Chris Farley was a 90s legend. And it was tragic that Chris Farley was robbed from us way too early due to the unfortunateness of drug addiction. This guy was a staple of 90s comedies with films like this, Beverly Hills Cop, Coneheads, Airheads, Billy Madison, and of course his other collaboration with David Spade, Black Sheep. He was even originally going to be the voice actor for Shrek before he passed away before they could even finish completing his voice, and Mike Myers then ended up taking over his place. Interestingly enough, we did get a clip of Chris Farley's voice acting when he was originally supposed to play Shrek, which is on YouTube. You guys can look it up. I think it's the scene where Shrek and Donkey are at the fireplace, and Shrek reveals how the reason why he's all alone is because people basically resent him the minute they even look at him. and him and Donkey are looking at the stars. It's that scene. I would have loved to see how the movie would have probably turned out had Chris Farley still been around and we didn't lose him so early. But I still like Mike Myers, but still. But now back to this movie. When it comes to my reaction to Tommy Boy as a film, I think of the movies he's done, this might have to be my favorites, and of the collaborations he did with David Spade. And I also think this is one of David Spade's best comedies as well. This movie has everything. It has a good storyline, good acting, great scenery, adventure, and some brilliant gags. This was back when comedy movies were actually funny. In the 90s was a staple for comedy. You had so many great comedies in the 90s. And the 80s too. In the 90s you had Home Alone, Wayne's World 1 and 2, Home Alone 2, even. Well, let's think of this movie. Among many others, Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison. Another film Chris Farley also starred in. Not a main role though, but a cameo role somewhat. And this one though, Chris Farley plays Tommy Callahan, whose father owns a successful company, Callahan Auto Parts. And Tommy Callahan is a bit of a slacker, but he finally manages to get out of college after he barely passes a test. And he finds that he now has a role in his dad's company, Callahan Auto Parts. But of course, unfortunately, his dad dies, and he has to go on the road to stop the company going under. And trouble is that Tommy pretty much knows nothing about brake pads, and needs the help of his Callahan Auto Parts rival, Richard, played by David Spade, who hates him for his slacker antics. And from the moment the two dorks hit the road, the movie's just so much fun. And him and Richard pretty much have to settle their differences and have to get along for a whole entire time because, well, yeah, they kind of have to settle their differences and actually learn to get along during the time they have to be on the road together. And they just run into so much mayhem the whole way there. Richard's the more mature one, but it's ironic because there's a scene where they're at this hotel and then you feel that Richard's not as mature as he seems, and is actually kind of just as a bit of a goof because there's this girl that's about to go skinny dipping in a pool, and Richard, as soon as he's alone in the room, he just basically tries to spy on the girl. And you actually see kind of a funny side in him the first time. But then Tommy comes back and he quickly shuts the blinds. So it looks like he's kind of still reading, or still going over work stuff. But this Tommy Boy is just constantly funny from beginning to end. Just thanks to the comedic duo of Farley and Spade. Farley's a ride as a title character, a spastic doofus who just sails your life as if it wasn't important. His slacker-esque ways to have to come to a halt when his father dies of a heart attack on their wedding day. And Tommy then has to... And then Tommy and Richard hit the road to sell the brake pads. And just backing up the plot though, there's this great cast of great actors. From the dynamic duo of Farley and Spade, these two actors make the movie what it is. The always loud, obnoxious Farley is perfect for the part of Tommy, who was perfect for the part of Tommy, and the loudmouth, who's the loudmouth dimwit fool. And then David Spade is as sarcastic as ever in his portrayal of Richard, a sarcastic know-it-all who accompanies Tommy on the brake pad selling journey. And these two very different characters just bickering on disagreements, paired with the ridiculous situations they find themselves, are even the main source of humor in this movie. With Tommy and Richard's crazy situations, along with other hilarious moments involving the rest of the supporting cast, Tommy Boy has everything a movie needs to be considered a great comedy. Between the slapstick humor, the crazy situations, the foolish actions and statements of Tommy, the sarcastic retorts of Richard, and the memorable lines that will be repeated by everyone for years, there's hardly any room to stop laughing. And behind every great movie is a great director, and Tommy Boy has Peter Segal to back it up. Peter Segal made many great comedies. And quite a few of these starred Adam Sandler at the time, who was also growing to fame in the 90s. His collaborations with Sandler often included The Longest Yard, 50 First Dates, and Anger Management, all three of which were great films. And some of the last few good funny movies Adam Sandler did. Yeah, we know he did Uncut Gems, but that was not till like 2019, and that was during a time when his career was in a rut. These were the three movies that were when his career was still turning out to be good. But and he by no means mars his reputation with this movie, but rather bolsters it. The movie is very well done and organized, and keeps the interest of the audience, and Tommy Boy is perhaps the best, most memorable of his impressive list of comedies. And the main reason Tommy Boy works are the funny performances from the lead cast. Farley is even the funniest person in this movie, the second funniest person being Spade, and the third being Rob Lowe, the film's villain who has bad luck everywhere he goes. And another funny guy, believe it or not, is Dan Aykroyd as Ray Zelinsky, a well-known odd parts extraordinate. Another reason the movie works is the large amount of jokes. Chris Farley has hilarious slapstick moments, and David Spade has funny snide moments and one-liners. The gags in the movie, like, one involves a deer, one involves an airplane bathroom and stuff, or even a damaged car, or even just laugh out loud funny. Thanks to director Siegel and writers Bonnie and Terry Turner. Yeah, the film was written by Barney Turner and produced by the well-established Lorne Michaels, whose brilliant mind for comedy show on Saturday Night Live is exemplified once again in Tommy Boy. Director Peter Siegel more or less started his career after this movie, and Tommy Boy is the second movie he directed, and it was quite a success. Some other films he didn't just do Adam Sandler collaborations, he also directed the sequel to The Nutty Professor 2, The Clumps. So he didn't just work with Adam Sandler or David Spade, he also worked with some actors like Eddie Murphy even. And he ventures entirely a Farley playground, with just a few spicy, sarcastic segments, and aside for a second-build counterpart Spade, the two do have very great chemistry here, which makes for good feelings when they finally work past their differences, and now he gets to call an Emmy. But Spade's aesthetic stylings are smartly limited to occasional counter punches, and Farley just has so much energy here. Not sure there'd be room for a partner on more equal footing, though. He dominates with jolly physicality and reels us in with, hard-on-sleeve self-deprecation, and even stings up with a few touches of lender sensitivity. And by the end of the road trip, they literally go through hell together. We finally see him grow up at the very end of the film. Even, that's a beautiful story right there. And not to mention, because speaking of that last part I said, this movie probably has to have one of the saddest moments in a comedy movie ever, and that's where Tommy's dad, Big Tom, dies. Like in the beginning of the film, Big Tom reveals he plans to marry Beverly Burns, a woman he met on a fat farm, and that her son, Paul, would become Tommy's new stepbrother. And it seems like him and his stepbrother seem like they're decently getting along. They go into town one night, and they pretty much crash a cow farm, go cow chasing, then get covered in like cow dung or cow poop, and then pretty much they have to go spray themselves off at a gas station. So it seems like things are really going along well between him and his new family members. But just as the day they're about to get married, and keep in mind, guys, Big Tom is a dad you actually immediately like the minute you meet him. Here, like, he's never annoyed with his son. He's not annoyed with his antics. I really like that here. They don't do the dad hates son cliche in this movie. Thank God they don't. And you already like him and his son's chemistry. And the saddest thing is, just as Big Tom and Beverly are both about to get married, Big Tom then dies from a heart attack during the reception. And it's one of the few examples of depressing moments in comedies done the right way without being way too pretentious. Here. This is back when emotional moments in comedies actually knew when to be emotional and actually balanced it evenly. And the depressing moments didn't hog up the rest of the movie. Now back to the funny stuff. When it comes to some of the funniest moments here, there would have to be this scene during the car sale scene. It's during their first time trying to sell their brake pads. Tommy and Richard are basically constantly just trying to sell brake pads to their clients. And of course, every owner is saying, and Richard tells Tommy, we don't take no for an answer. But of course, Tommy forgets that rule. The owners always say no. Tommy acts all chill about it. It's like, okay, then thank you. And just leaves, like every one of them. He forgets that they're not supposed to accept no for an answer, but he's just basically chill about them refusing their brake pads. Since he's new to the job, new to the ownership and stuff, and then one client finally does not say no, but says maybe, so they try to get him interested, but then Tommy takes it a little too far because their owner that says maybe has these little model cars on his desk. Tommy pretty much takes the model cars so to demonstrate the brake pads. It's like, so you're driving along and with the new car, this one he demonstrates with, and he's like, okay, oof, that was close. But then, of course, eventually, he goes a little overboard with the little model Jeep, little wheel wagon car, and then just pretty much does the same thing, except this time, this one would not have the brake pads in here. It's like, I can't stop. There's a cliff. Ah! And he even sets the destroyed thing on fire. And of course, the new guy in the chorus puking his guts out. Ugh! And the other guy's like, oh my god. And even during this scene, you could literally see David Spade try not to break character. Because Farley even had a reputation where he almost made some of his co-stars almost break character during his funny moments and stuff. It's pretty genius right there. But of course, the owner does not like this demonstration, and he just yells at him to get out. And then there's some other funny moments too. It's where Tommy and Richard are at a diner, and of course, unfortunately, the waitress says all the hot stuff is turned off, so the only stuff we have are desserts and cold stuff. But of course, then Tommy goes into this little speech thing that inspires the lady to actually turn the fryers on so that he can have wings because he wants wings. And then we find out that's how Tommy finally realizes he had found a way to actually be able to sell the brake pads. Is the little wings technique that kind of, I think like Richard calls it the little wings technique here. And that's where Tommy realizes he has to use that technique to be able to get the brake pads to sell here. And that's where they finally settle their differences here, and they start to become friends more, because most of the movie they kind of seem to really, Richard and Tommy don't really like being on the road together and stuff. And another thing I also forgot to mention, even Tommy has this habit of pretty much eating in Richard's new car, which he doesn't want him to do at all, as the car's like really new. And the villains are also pretty good. Like, even it's a pretty interesting twist that's revealed quite a bit early in the film, where it turns out Beverly and Tommy's stepbrother are actually not his new family members. They were actually con artists, and they're actually a couple here that were actually they're pretty much actually trying to destroy the company to get profits. So that was an interesting twist right there. Here. And there's many other great moments here too, and especially it's during the end where Tommy's pretty much now grown up. He's about to go on a date with his girlfriend, I'm not going to mention later on in the beginning of the film, after this part, and he's like wishing his dad could provide some wind for his boat to move, and his boat actually, and get this guys, his boat actually moves in the water, where in an earlier scene it never moved in the water, but this time Big Tom's spirits actually helps the boat move. And that's even how the movie ends, because the movie ends with Tommy successfully saving his company. Here, pretty much foiling the con artist's plan to demolish it. And he finally becomes a new owner, grows up, and decides to take his role in the company more seriously. And then he pretty much goes on a date with Michelle. Goes on his date with his love interest, Michelle, and his boat finally moves, and it's a perfect end to the story right there. There's no sequel set up, no franchise set up, just a perfect one-and-done story right there. However, if I did have to have some nitpicks with the film, now while the villain reveal is a pretty nice twist, I think the two villains, though, they're just kind of bland villains. There's no really motivation to them other than they just want to ruin Big Tom's business. And now, the love interest I've mentioned earlier, the love interest Michelle, I just feel like I'm going to get hate for this part. I just think she's just kind of pointless. She just doesn't really contribute much to the story. She's just kind of there to be a love interest. Kind of think more could have been done with her character a little more. But she does get a bit of a funny moments where, forget what she says, but it's during the scene where they're on Tommy's little yacht boat together. These three boys are pretty much making fun of Tommy, and during that scene, I forget what she yells, but she yells something funny, and that pretty much finally gets the three boys running off scared. So there's one funny moment she does get there. So, and when it comes to Dan Aykroyd's character Ray Zelinsky, I do wish Ray Zelinsky played a bit of a bigger role in this film too. But other than those nitpicks I have right there, I still think Tommy Boy is one of the best comedies movies of the 90s. In the end, Tommy Boy is a perfect comedy that is worth watching and buy for Chris Farley fans and 90s fans that loves comedy when it's actually funny, without a doubt. In the end, that's it for my review of Tommy Boy. If you're wondering how I'm going to rate Tommy Boy, here's how I'm going to rate this movie.
So overall, if you were a fan of Chris Farley and a fan of 90s comedy, then I highly recommend watching and buying this movie for your collection for sure. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Tommy Boy, I'm going to give Tommy Boy a 9 out of 10.
There we go. That pretty much wraps up my review for Tommy Boy. And you're wondering what the next other older movie review is going to be. Well, this is going to be for a review of a film from 1984, and it's a film starring Kevin Bacon for the older movie reviews. And I think some of you MCU fans would know this is obviously Star-Lord's favorite movie of all time. Yeah. I think you know the movie I'm talking about. But until then, guys, that will be it for this review. Thank y'all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.